A very good afternoon, all of you. This is Dr. Neelmani Jaysawal, Assistant Professor, Department of Social Work, Visva-Bharati University. I am very much indebted to International Conference on Social Work and Sciences towards One Health and Sustainable Development 2022, organized in collaboration with Sri Holistic Health Foundation of India and Sri Research Institute and Center for Arts, Sciences and Wellbeing, along with Indian Society of Professional Social Work and International Federation of Social Workers, for giving me the opportunity to present my research findings in this conference. The title of the paper which I'm going to present is the role of sustainable rural livelihood in women empowerment. So here I will like to present my findings related to the strategies taken by sustainable rural livelihood for strengthening the women's capacity, not only in its economic genre, but also socio-political genre. So I would like to also present some of the case studies to substantiate my argument. So the entire presentation which I'm going to bring it here is based on the secondary sources of the data. So first, we like to see the sustainable livelihood. As we know that sustainable livelihood relates to the wide set of issues which encompass much of the broader debate about its relationship with poverty and environment. So we have to see sustainable rural livelihood not only in the context of its pure economic relationship, but also we have to see its connection with the environment. As we know that a livelihood comprises the capabilities, assets, and activities which is required for a means of living. So it is sustainable when it can cope with and recover from stress and shocks. As we know that livelihood is always have some impediments which affect it in its continuity, which emerge as a shocks and stresses. So the question emerges that how this continuity can be maintained, how we can make our livelihood program sustainable one, so that not only our present generation, but also our future generation also can get benefited out of it. So this entire framework of sustainable rural livelihood has adopted the terminology from ecological literature, where the sustainability has been considered to be an ability of system to maintain productivity despite some disturbance. So in ecological studies, sustainability is a term which maintains the productivity, overcoming various challenges and disturbances. So the same nomenclature we have adopted in our economy when you are dealing with a sustainable livelihood. So here, various definitions have been brought out by various organizations, various authors, like one of the organizations like DFID, Department for International Development, UK. It has attempted to define sustainable livelihood as focusing on the development efforts to eliminate the poverty and encourage the economic growth which benefits the poor. So it is focusing sustainable livelihood as elimination of poverty and encouragement of economic growth. Similarly, according to Edward H. Allison, sustainable rural livelihood approach seeks to improve the rural development policy and practice through recognizing the seasonal and cyclical complexity of livelihood strategy. So it helps to remove the access constraints to assets and activities which complement the existing patterns. Again, if you see in a general term, in a general connotation, we find that sustainable livelihood is a conglomeration of poverty reduction strategies, sustainable development and empowerment process for policy analysis. So what we basically see that it not only helps in terms of reducing the adversity of our life, especially the poverty stricken adversity in our life, but also it helps in terms of empowerment process. So it not only reduces the bottlenecks, the challenges, but also it helps in terms of empowering our youths, empowering our people, especially women. So it works in the form of multiple capital approach, where sustainability may be achieved in terms of available capital. So if you see this sustainable livelihood framework, we find that it has various capitals in its core, like human capital, social capital, natural capital, financial capital, physical capital. Human capital is like labor capacity, where it suffers from limited skills, no education. Natural capital is access to common property resources, which is also suffering from landlessness. Financial capital, which is access to credit and the revenue, which is also suffering from low wages. Physical capital, which is considered to be housing and communications, it is also suffering from the diversity in this sector, the deficiency of water supply, a good housing facility. Then social capital, which is the trust, cooperation, it is also suffering from various discriminatory practices against women, against children. So all these capital, which are one of the components of sustainable rural livelihood framework, are suffering from certain stress and anxieties, bottlenecks, which is affecting the achievement of the sustainability in livelihood. So if you see in a shape here, we find that there are shocks, trends, and seasonality which affect the achievement of sustainable livelihood. So there are certain transforming structures and processes like laws, policies, our institutions, culture, which can help in coming out of these kinds of shocks and stresses brought into this aspect. So definitely we need to strategize on this sustainable rural livelihood, that how it may help in terms of empowering women, how those shocks and stresses in sustainable rural livelihood may not impact the empowerment of women. So there are certain strategies like sustainable livelihood approach basically is to access women living in poverty and guide them to help themselves. So as a part of this framework, a lot of self-help groups, community-based organizations, cooperative societies have been developed by our government and non-governmental institutions to help women in empowering their socio-economic status, strengthening their economic and political capacity. Like if you see the strategies, the organization of rural poor women into self-help group has been considered to be a very effective anti-poverty intervention with a positive impact on economic growth and a range of social development indicators. Here women have been involved in terms of financial inclusion program to deal with the revenue generation model, to deal with the entrepreneurship development model, so that their livelihood could be continued. Swam Siddha is an integrated scheme for women empowerment through formation of women into self-help group. If we see the data by Wilson, we find that there have been more than 1 million SHGs in India with more than 17 million members. So a huge network of self-help groups which has been created in India is basically aimed at strengthening their economic power, which also satisfied the characteristics of sustainable rural livelihood in women's development. Another one is development of women's cooperative. After self-help group, if any other institution is significant for empowerment of women is the cooperative society, because cooperative society also works on decentralized mechanism. The membership in this enterprise allows women to build their working and personal relation, increases their social standing, because definitely women are coming out of the wheel of their households. They are crossing the boundary of their four walls, and they are coming and discussing not only their economic issues, but also socio-political issues and getting aware of that. So the awareness generation is also due to this women's cooperative, which helps in terms of women empowerment. Another strategy of sustainable rural livelihood in women empowerment is the microfinance. We know that the microfinance and microcredit has been one of the successful institutions across the South Asia to empower women. So an integral part of this program is to help the women to develop a sense of ownership, which provides rural women knowledge in terms of accounts keeping, budget planning, and many other things. Like we are talking about gender-based budgeting. So how we can talk about that gender-based budgeting unless and until we make women as the prime participant of the budget process, their inclusion in the budget making. So it can be done only through the inclusion of microfinance in this sector, which has been brought by Sustainable Rural Livelihood very successfully. Another one is the participation of women in livestock management. Definitely, we know that in poor households in the rural areas, women are the only breadwinner. They are the only breadwinner for their entire family. So they have to do all the jobs, not only within household but outside the household. They have to take care of the livestock. They have to take care of the agricultural activity. So in those households which are poverty stricken, the role of women is very immense. So according to some estimates, women constitute nearly 93% of workers in dairy and animal husbandry. So their involvement in this sector is more than 90%. So here also, if we can work, we can help women so that they could have their economic independence. Another strategy is involving women in forest conservation. We know that tribal women have been quite adept at forest conservation because they are the stakeholders who rear the forest, nurture the forest. So this is also one of the strategies through which women can be self-empowered, self-dependent. So this is one of the strategies adopted by Sustainable Rural Livelihood Framework. Another strategy is the participation of women in fisheries development. Fisheries, which is also considered to be one of the profitable occupation in eastern parts of the country, in southern part of the country. So if we involve women, if we make them capable enough to do this kind of occupation, definitely it will help in terms of their economic independence. As modernization leads to freshwater pollution and marine degradation, it is the women who have been at the forefront of the several struggle for their access to fishing rights. So women can also bring a balance between economic activity and environmental protection through very careful approach to these kinds of occupation. So fishing could not be anti-environment. Fishing could not degrade environment. With the women who can take a very careful step in terms of that. They may be involved in drying. They could be involved as a producers for producing fishes after fishing and storing it for sale and keeping it in drying units. So they can take care of both their economic capacity. They can work on the frontiers of economic development as well as they can safeguard the environment from getting degraded. So these are all the strategies which the Sustainable Rural Livelihood Framework has adopted to empower women so that their economic development may not be at the cost of environmental degradation. So it could be sustainable for both their next generation as well as for the environmental protection. So there are certain cases in different parts of the country which I have highlighted here, which can be one of the significant examples of women empowerment led by sustainable livelihood. One is the fish smoking in Andhra Pradesh. In Andhra Pradesh, fish smoking has been one of the popular rural livelihood activities run by the women at Godavari Delta. Here, women of the households spend long hours in smoking, turning the fish, tending to the fire. So it has helped the women in terms of engaging themselves in some livelihood generation activity through this fishery work. Another example is in Gujarat. Vejpur is a small village in Hilodar Taluka of Sabarkantha district in Gujarat, where forests have been managed by women's cooperative group on sustainable basis. Here the group consisting of representatives of each household participates in protection activity on a daily rotational basis. So here women get a lot of impetus in terms of management of trees and the forest resources so that it could not create an uneven development, a development which is not incommensurate with environment. So here women have worked very hard in terms of protecting the forests as well as running their livelihood. Next one is again in livelihood management, livestock management in Andhra Pradesh. Here the micro studies reveal that women have a very high stake in dairying. Nearly 93% of them are involved in dairy work. So livestock, dairy, all are being run by women single-handedly. And also the matter of fact is that most of the women come from a Dalit community. So it is also the marginalized women who are running these kinds of occupation. So women know the practices related to the postpartum care and calf management. The majority of the cattle keepers are landless women who have been migrated from various smaller parts of Andhra Pradesh to nurture this kind of livestock work for their economic purpose. So they are earning the opportunity throughout the year. They do not have to search for any other alternative livelihood. They are very good in terms of calf management, the health management of the cattle, and also helping in the rearing of the animals. So this is one of the successful activity in this basically Andhra Pradesh, basically in the rural areas where the fodder cultivation, management of small ruminants, all have been single-handedly held by the women. Again, in Odisha, the backward poultry is also one of the significant example of women empowerment. Here, the poultry rearing has been done by women. Almost 60% of the tribal and scheduled caste women are involved in rearing of the poultry in the backyard. The tribals and people in Koraput, Bolangir, Kalahandi districts of Odisha are very much involved in Drakri. There has been one Swan Jyoti Women Poultry Cooperative Federation, which has involved various self-help groups in marketing of poultry. So in Odisha, in Kalahandi, Bolangir, Koraput districts, women belonging to the SC and ST categories have been quite involved, and they have showcased their entrepreneurship in terms of their poultry through the establishment of Poultry Cooperative Federation and involving the self-help groups. So this is also one of the significant example of women empowerment. Again, in Madhya Pradesh, Odisha and Jharkhand, the watershed planning has been one of the significant initiatives taken by women. Here, the watershed development committee has been established, where nearly 35 to 40% members are women. And these women come basically from the same self-help groups, which are also involved in some of the livestock activity. So they are also involved in watershed planning. So they are managing the natural resources. They are keeping all the requisite technical know-how through which the watershed planning could be successful. And they are taking the single-handedly all the activities which are responsible for this. So here the self-help group has proven to be a very successful institution for mobilizing women in this project area. So what we basically find after seeing all these cases in different corners of the country, that sustainable rural livelihood programs, either in terms of livestock development, either in terms of forest management, either in terms of watershed management, in almost all the activities, women have been quite involved, and they have showcased that they can not only nurture their household members, but they can also nurture out of the household the natural resources, cattle, in the similar fashion. So this sustainable rural livelihood framework can definitely help through all these strategies in strengthening the morale of the women, their economic and social capacity, so that they are not always subjugated within the four walls of the households. Rather, they can come out and they can also participate effectively. So this approach is basically a very important step towards development thinking. It is a manifestation of enhanced manpower planning in the direction of regeneration of natural resources. So the encouragement of rural women for sustainable rural livelihood may reduce various shocks, vulnerabilities due to their active physical capital and close network. So as I had already highlighted various capitals, social capital, natural capital, physical capital. As women are one of the nurturers of this capital, and they are very strong in social capital because their networking, their subgroups are very strong. So they can be able to maintain sustainability in livelihood, which may help not only our future generations, but also our nature, the regeneration of natural resources, and enhancement of our ecological atmosphere. So with this note, I would like to end my presentation. In case is there any clarification required, I am free to contact at this email ID. So very thank you, all of you, for patiently listening to my presentation. Thank you very much.